For our problem today, we will be taking the derivative of y equals 3 times 1 minus sine x over 2 times cosine x, using the quotient rule. Before starting, it is necessary to know the derivative of sine x is cosine x, the derivative of cosine x is negative sine x, and the derivative of a constant is 0. It is also necessary to know the quotient rule, which is the denominator times the derivative of the numerator minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator all over the denominator squared. The first step in this problem is to take out the 3 halves and let the 3 halves remain idle throughout the problem since it is a constant multiplier. Now you are ready to derive. The quotient rule tells us that the derivative of 1 minus sine x over cosine x will be low, which is cosine x, times the derivative of the top, which will come out to be negative cosine x, since the derivative of the constant is 0 and the derivative of sine x is cosine x. It is important to remember that there is a negative sign, which will make the positive cosine x into a negative cosine x. This will be subtracted by the numerator, which is 1 minus sine x times the derivative of the denominator, cosine x, which will be negative sine x. This will be all over the denominator squared, which will turn out to be cosine squared x. It is important to put the second term in a bracket to remember to distribute the negative sign into it later when you're simplifying. Next, you simplify. Cosine x times negative cosine x will turn out to be negative cosine squared x. Then distribute the negative sine x into the binomial 1 minus sine x. This will give you negative sine x plus sine x squared. Since this binomial is in parentheses, you must distribute the negative. This will give you positive sine x minus sine x squared all over cosine squared x. Next, you can break up each numerator with its denominator. This will give you negative cosine squared x over cosine squared x plus sine x over cosine x times 1 over cosine x. It is important to know here that these remain plain cosine x and not cosine squared x because these two terms are being multiplied together rather than these being subtracted and added. Minus sine squared x over cosine squared x. This will give you 3 halves. This negative cosine squared x over cosine squared x is equal to 1, with the negative sign will be negative 1, plus sine x over cosine x will give you tangent times 1 over cosine is secant minus tangent squared x, which comes from sine squared x over cosine squared x. Now for here, it is important to note that negative 1 minus tangent squared x is a Pythagorean identity that gives you negative secant squared x. Since this will give you negative secant squared x, you can then plug it back in, which will give you 3 halves multiplied by negative secant squared x plus tangent times secant x. Then to take this a step further to give you your final answer for simplifying, you can take out a secant in the binomial and factor that out, which will give you 3 halves times secant x multiplied by tangent x minus secant x.